Seth Godin is an author, speaker, and entrepreneur that Business Week called one of the most influential thinkers in business. He went from using his life savings of $20,000 to create Seth Godin Productions from his studio apartment in New York City to then writing 18 best-selling books and having over 3 million people attend his speeches. Need motivation?
Watch your top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 for my top 10, top 10, 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Seth Godin, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Fly closer to the sun.
The story of Icarus is fascinating to look at from a cultural perspective. It's been around for thousands of years. We all know it. Daedalus and Icarus go to a desert island. Daedalus, the dad, makes wings out of feathers, gives them to his son, puts them on with wax, says to his son, obey your father, we're flying out of here. Don't fly too high, because if you fly too high, the wax will melt and you'll die. And we all know what happened. Icarus got uppity, he had hubris, he disobeyed his father, and he died. Except that's not what the myth said in 1700 or 1500 or 1200. They changed it. It used to say, but more important, don't fly too low. Because if you fly too low, the water and the mist will weigh down your wings and you will surely perish. They took that part out.
Why do you think they took that out?
They took it out because the people in power, the industrialists, want us to fly lower. Because it's easier to ignore us, it's easier to keep us in line, it's easier to get a factory job that way. People who have the hubris to dream of something bigger change the status quo. And the people who are in charge aren't in favor of that.
Rule number 2, keep your promises.
Once you've been busy pressing the buzzer, now you have to say to yourself, what am I not going to do in order to be able to do that?
Yes.
So this is about making promises and keeping them. So I am not going to say to somebody, please go ahead, engage with me in this level, and I will get back to you, because maybe I can't. I don't go to meetings. I don't watch television. So right there, I save 7 hours that most people waste every single day. That 7 hours gives me a lot of space to do things that make me seem insanely productive, right?
Yes.
Because I'm not doing these other things. Well, other people really should go to meetings. Other people really should watch TV. That will make them productive in the way they seek to be productive. I'm just saying you pick.
Yeah.
So Twitter was easy for me because I said to myself, if I'm going to do Twitter, I should commit to it. There's a dip. And if I commit, I should figure out how to be really good at it. If I'm going to be really good at it, I'm going to have to give up something else. So what do I want to be less good at than I'm good at now so I could be good at Twitter? And I looked at what I thought would be the upsides of that. And I said, I don't want to give up anything I'm good at to be good at Twitter. Done. And I never have reconsidered it since because I don't need to. And there are other areas where I have said, you know what? I'm going to give up this part of my thing to do that thing instead. But we have to acknowledge we have finite resources, finite time, finite connections.
Yes.
How will we use them to produce outcomes that we're proud of? And the worst thing to do, in the words of Zig Ziglar, are to be a wandering generality. What you need to be is a meaningful specific. That means you have to claim it. You have to put yourself on the spot. You have to make a promise and say, I do this. You can count on me. That's what you're going to get from me.
Rule number 3, be generous.
I think the currencies of anybody who wants to make change happen right now are attention and trust. And they're in a virtuous cycle. You don't get attention unless you're trusted. You don't get trusted unless you get attention. There are other kinds of attention. You can, light yourself on fire in the street, but
Sure.
You don't earn trust doing that. So this attention-trust cycle goes around. The question then is, how do you get there? I don't think you get there by saying, how do I hustle a content media play to figure out how to get in front of people who never heard of me and somehow seduce them? I think you do it by being generous. I think that people tend to trust folks who step up before they have to, They trust people who keep their promises, especially when it's not convenient. They trust people who tell them the truth. And if you do those things, they're probably going to tell someone else, and then you'll get more attention and more chances to be generous, and the cycle goes and goes and goes. And guess what? It probably never ends at a moment when you say, okay, now it's my turn to take. We left the take part out mostly. You don't feel like you owe Heinz anything. You don't feel like you owe TWA anything. You just are in this environment where you know your attention is precious. You know your trust has been abused. If someone shows up and treats your attention with kindness and earns your trust every day, well then one of the byproducts will be they'll want to hear what you have to say next.
Rule number 4, don't try to fit in.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but I do know where public school came from. And public school was invented by factory owners who didn't have enough compliant factory workers. And it worked great. For 100 years, we had this wonderful system. Do what you're told, go to the placement office, you'll get a job for 50 years. You won't really like the job, but you'll be able to go home and watch TV, buy enough stuff you'll need a storage unit, and then you'll die. And the deal was straightforward and kept on both sides. And during our lifetime in the last 20 years, the deal's off. And the mistake, the problem, is that people are still seduced into thinking that what they're supposed to do is fit in more. And social media has made it worse because there's this whole pack mentality of how do I fit in more with small bursts of here's one quick tip for a flat stomach and 3 different ways to get rich, and you can learn to flip houses today and be a millionaire tomorrow. None of which work, right? But the combination of those two mean that people are starting to feel broken and bitter because the promise isn't being kept.
Also, if you want to have more self-love, confidence, and motivation, check out my 254 series, where every day for the next 254 days, I send you an email with a link to an unlisted video to boost your confidence. The links to join are in the description below, and it's free.
Because being a really, really good listener is one of the most underrated secrets to success.
I would rather take the risk of walking out knowing that I might get moved in a way that I've never experienced before, more than just go and have a nice night out and see something that I know is good.
You got to separate the vehicle from the outcome. What is it that's going to truly fulfill you? What is it that's going to give you that extraordinary life?
Rule number 5, be good at buzzer management.
Productivity is an economic measure of how much you output for the amount of time and resources you put in. Some people have figured out how to be naturally more productive than others per minute. And the way you do that is by having an instinct to ship, not an instinct to polish, to be perfect, to justify you're not shipping. That most people hesitate to ship, not because it's not ready, but because they're afraid. So I did a post about a year ago called Buzzer Management.
Okay,
And
we'll put a link to it below.
That's how you win at Jeopardy. The people who win at Jeopardy aren't better than the people who lose at Jeopardy, except in one thing. They press the buzzer before anybody else. And the only way to press the buzzer before everyone else is to press the buzzer before you're sure you know the answer. So as your brain is thinking, maybe I can get it, now you press the buzzer, and in that last moment, you're going to come up with something. Right? So you agreed to do your Oprah talk. Was it done the day you agreed to do it?
Oh, hell no.
So, but you pressed the buzzer.
I did.
Right?
Yes.
You pressed the buzzer, which is going to require, so do I have a blog post coming out tomorrow? I do.
Yeah.
I actually pressed the buzzer 10 years ago. So I know that's going to happen.
Yes.
So I'm apparently super productive because I'm good at buzzer management. I'm good at saying, I have this much time and there will be a thing when I'm done.
Rule number 6, make a blog.
How much time do you spend on a blog post, you think, on average? I mean, I'm sure they all vary.
Well, I spend 10 hours a day thinking about the next blog post. I
Right.
write a bunch, but you don't see most of them.
What do you just like kill them?
Yeah. No.
Well, they stick around, right? You might bring them
Well-
back. You might, like, I assume when you're spending 10 hours a day, in 4 weeks, you may spend 10 hours and you're like, oh, shit, and recall
Sure,
it
it all
back and have that
connects, but
sentence,
that's why I think every human should have a blog, even if you don't put your name on it. Every day, write something that you're willing to put in the world so that a week from now and a month from now and a year from now, you can look back at it and say, I said this.
Rule number 7, have the guts to be specific.
You may have heard about lean entrepreneurship, and you should make the minimum viable product.
MVPs, they call them.
Right? And if you look back to the early courses you launched, you wouldn't launch one of those today. But you need to put it into the world, not because it's lousy, because it wasn't lousy, but because it's primitive. But what primitive means is I solved a small problem for somebody and I can see how it works. And that has been proven to work over and over again.
Yep.
Well, in marketing, I want to argue that we've all been trained to pitch the largest possible audience. Because we're
total addressable
spammers.
market. There's all these acronyms that talk about how you're supposed to only think big, and words like scale, total addressable market, they drive me crazy. But
exactly. Gross rating points, gross, right? What if we did the opposite? What if we got specific? What if we said, if there were 100 people I changed, 200 people I taught, 1,000 people who were my patrons, what if we could do that? Would it be enough? It wouldn't be magic, wouldn't be a home run, but would it be enough? And if the answer is yes, then we become specific and obsessed with that. Because if you can't pull that off, well, then you're not an artist. But if you can pull that off, you know what they'll do? They'll tell their friends. Because it's so extraordinary, they have to share it. And then it gets bigger and bigger. But we begin by having the guts to be specific, as opposed to hiding behind infinity.
Rule number 8, know when to pull the trigger.
I am not a good role model for how to take on the next project. I spend way too much time in the pre-committal stage.
What do you mean?
Well, so I wrote a book called The Dip, which is all about why quitting is a useful tactic. But that you should never quit when it gets hard. Don't quit your gym in February if you joined in January. If you're going to do that, don't even join, right? But quit before you start, or quit once you realize it's a dead end. But quitting in the key moment is the wrong idea. Well, quitting before you start means outline the plan, act as if, describe what could happen. And then you're either in which case you're into the end, or you're not. And in that moment, it's really easy to just let it sit. And sometimes I let it sit too long because I'm afraid, because I don't want to commit 3, 5, 7 years of my life to building a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes I let it sit because I don't see it clearly enough. And sometimes I let it sit because, in fact, it was a bad idea. Right? And other people are better at pulling the trigger and saying, go. I used to be better at it, but as the stakes have risen and as the amount of time I have to spend a decade on a project goes down, I'm more hesitant to commit. And that's not necessarily a good practice. I need to get back into that spirit of how do I pick among 3 and really commit.
Rule number 9, be the linchpin.
So let's think about a job where you have to train 12 years to be good at it, radiology. You and I could never read an x-ray and figure out if someone's got a broken leg or not. Well, a few years ago, they figured out that x-rays are digital. So you don't need the person to read them here. Scan them, send them someplace overseas where someone's cheaper. They don't have to do that anymore because now a computer can do it. And a computer can do it better than an average radiologist. So what jobs are left for radiologists? The job of being so expert at something and doing something so beyond competence that a computer isn't going to be able to learn how to do it. That all we've got left are jobs where you're doing something someone can't tell you what to do. Because if someone can tell you how to do your job, we can find someone cheaper than you to do it.
Do you have a process for that? So that's so powerful. When I read Linchpin, it changed me. And it changed me at a point in my life where I had a lot of employees. And I struggled with this notion of, okay, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I started doing that, and then I would make a terrible employee. And so, but how do I have 1,400 employees and preach like everyone should be an entrepreneur? I'm like, the math doesn't add up. It literally would make my own company fall apart.
The math doesn't add up. Quest was this huge home run, and you owned a factory. You may not have had a building with steam coming out the top, but it was a factory. You needed people to do factory jobs. And those people probably had a good job. But the point is that going forward, most organizations are going to get smaller and smaller per dollar in sales because you don't need as many people. Right? If you think about how many people worked at Sears Roebuck versus how many people work at Amazon now, if you think about how many people it takes at Tesla to make a car compared to how many Henry Ford needed to make a car, we're all going in the same direction. So you have a choice, and the choice is one of 3 things. Either you're the replaceable cog in the pyramid who's going to get paid as little as possible, or you're the founder, the owner, the person who runs the thing. But for most of us, the best choice is to be the linchpin, the one we can't live without, the person who figures out what to do next. And I'm betting that of the 1,400 people who worked for you, you had 50 linchpins. And those people made the place work.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is be persistent.
I am averse to the failure Olympics because I think sometimes it gives us a place to hide. But there are two kinds of failures. I have failed more times than anyone who's watching this in terms of projects brought forward that didn't resonate. When I was a book packager, I got 800 rejections in a row. And for more than 10 years, I was on the edge of bankruptcy, 4 weeks away from being completely out of money. When we were building Yoyodyne, the company that ended up going to Yahoo, our biggest client was AOL. And at one point, the VP of AOL said to me on the phone, "If you set foot on our campus, I will have you arrested."
Oh, wow.
Right? So it was high stakes. And there are things that I brought, books I worked on for a year that sold 1,000 copies. There were projects, another thing we did for AOL was one of the best ideas I ever had. We worked on it for a year. We built the whole thing out. And a week before it launched, AOL switched its business model from royalty to flat rate, which meant the project got canceled.
Oh.
And so there's a lot of bumper cars when you decide to do a life of projects. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The real failure that I think is worth talking about, that's way more interesting now that I've survived the other kind, is the failure of inaction. And like everyone, I have a really long list of that. What are the things I could have done and didn't? Who are the people I could have helped but didn't? And that's the kind of thing I try to pay attention to, because I know a lot of people who have succeeded, and the reason they succeeded is because they persisted, but also because they protected against the downside. So they still protect against the downside. But what could they have accomplished if they had protected a little bit less against the downside and instead said, it doesn't matter that this might fail. What matters is that this is worth trying. And that's something I try to motivate myself to do all the time.
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy. But before that, if you're still here watching and you promise, you commit that you're gonna take action after watching this video, you're not just gonna watch a video, you're gonna do something afterwards, give me a hashtag believe in the comments, because I want to celebrate you.
When I was at Yahoo, the homepage was sold out 2 years in advance because amateur marketers with money say, let's buy the internet, buy the homepage. But it wasn't worth anything.
Those takeovers and stuff.
Right.
Remember that. I
It
remember
was worth
that.
nothing.
Yeah.
Because it was way better to be in front of the right person on the right day for the right reason to say, this thing, instant yes. And if you can't build an instant yes, then all the spamming of your friends and family isn't going to make it any better.
If you want to see the top 10 I did on Marie Forleo, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
And maybe in like 10 or 20 years, you're gonna be awesome. And every time I tried to follow that conventional wisdom that told me to pick one thing, I felt like I was cutting off a limb.